Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Martyrs Day of Rage erupts in Cairo's Tahrir Square. Bahraini opposition group deems national dialogue a sham. And dozens of Yemeni troops defect to the opposition. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
Syrians continue to stage protests, demanding the ouster of the regime and rejecting its call for a dialogue. Massive protests have been held in the past 24 hours in Hama, Homs, Latakia, Deir ez-Zur, and other cities in Rif Dimashq.
Meanwhile, the Syrian army continues to carry out its security campaign in the area of Idlib. In what was attributed to eyewitnesses, Reuters said that the army tanks have stormed several areas in the Jabal al-Zawiya region in Idlib province, where sounds of shelling could be heard.
In Syria, where the president is inviting the opposition to begin talks, security forces are engaging in a rather different dialogue with the protesters with an iron fist. Here in Homs, security forces are beating this protester because he dared call for a democratic state that protects his rights.
In Syria,
there's a wide gap between the ruling Ba'ath Party and the people who are rising up for freedom. As the protests continue, the killings do as well. The protesters took to the streets of Homs, Hama, Latakia, Rif Dimashq, Deir ez-Zur, and Al-Kamishli, demanding the ouster of the regime. They chanted slogans in solidarity with the victims who lost their lives and the thousands of political prisoners and refugees.
التي امتلأت بجثامين الضحايا وآلاف المعتقلين السياسيين واللاجئين. يتحدث الأسد الابن عن الإصلاح.
Assad the son is talking about reforms like the opposition is. However, the two sides are not talking about the same reforms. Assad's reforms don't meet the minimum objectives of the people rising up for the sake of building a civil and democratic state. They are calling for comprehensive, not partial reforms that are limited to constitutional amendments, such as the amendment of Article 8 of the Constitution.
التي كثر الحديث عنها. صحيح أن هذه المادة تكرس احتكار حزب البعث للسلطة.
It's true that Article 8 affirms the Ba'ath Party as the leading authority. However, it is not the only obstacle to the democratic transition in Syria, as confirmed by the opposition. The opposition says that the constitution is filled with additional articles, granting the president absolute power and immunity from accountability or prosecution. The president can only be tried before a constitutional court whose members are appointed by him. The opposition is demanding a number of articles be deleted from the Constitution, including Article 11, which authorizes the army to defend the objectives of the Ba'ath Revolution. Article 11 was put to test today in Jabal al-Zawiya in Idlib province, where Syrian army tanks have moved to besiege the area. Article 11 grants constitutional authorization for the president and the army to conduct military operations not only along the border, but also against those being described by the regime as enemies on the internal front. Enemies which the regime is accusing of targeting the objectives of the revolution: unity, freedom, and socialism. The revocation of Article 8 of the Constitution is one of many demands. Among other demands is the revocation of all articles granting absolute power to the president, in addition to drafting new laws for judicial authorities, political parties, the media, and elections. In brief, what the protesters are calling for is the drafting of a new constitution. In other words, the establishment of a new republic and not a second Ba'ath Republic. A new republic that is an extension of the first democratic state built in the era prior to military coups. The opposition is calling for an awakened Syria, a liberated Syria that embraces democracy and diversity.
Following a confrontation that lasted until early morning, calm was restored to the Egyptian capital's central Tahrir Square. Entrances to the square were closed and police forces have withdrawn from the site. The clashes injured dozens of police and protesters. Clashes broke out after a group of people stormed a celebration honoring the families of victims of the January 25th revolution. The confrontation deepens the split between the people and security forces, especially since frustration dominates the Egyptian street due to the repeated postponement of the trials of former high-ranking officials who served during Mubarak's era.
Tahrir Square is witnessing a tense morning. Protesters shut down some of its entrances and the police have fully withdrawn from the square after a night of violent clashes that led to dozens of casualties. Stories on the reason behind the clashes are varied. The Interior Ministry's official story indicates that a group of people stormed a celebration honoring the martyrs' families, claiming they were also family members of martyrs. They forcefully entered the celebration and assaulted a number of participants. Then they left the site and headed toward a protest in front of the state TV headquarters, Maspero, and from there headed to the Interior Ministry. There they broke the windows of some shops and threw stones at police officers. The police were forced to respond with tear gas. However, the truth has many different faces. Protesters deny the Interior Ministry's story and say that police assaulted protesters for no reason. The protesters were demanding to rush the sentencing of the former regime's figureheads. Others said the celebration was to honor the martyrs of the police, not the citizens.
They were honoring the families of the martyrs in the Balloon Theater in the Aguza neighborhood. The police attacked them without any reason.
Another narrative indicates that a court decision to dismantle local councils angered its members. So they headed to the celebration honoring martyrs and beat people, then came to the square in the Interior Ministry headquarters. For this reason, the police interfered in an attempt to disperse the group. However, the police's intervention only made matters worse.
The people are sick of it. The government's thugs wouldn't even do this to slaves.
The Interior Ministry is using the same system and methods and has the same manners. The Interior Ministry has not changed the way people think it has. The agency is still the same.
The events ended only after the Interior Minister ordered his men to completely withdraw from the square. The government and the military council warned of plots to incite agitation between the people and the security forces. It appears that these plots have been successful. These clashes prove that the situation on the Egyptian street is still fragile and subject to explode at any moment, during any tense events or uncalculated measures. Ahmed Kilani, Dubai TV, Cairo.
في موضوع آخر أفاد مراسلنا في اليمن بخروج تظاهرات في العاصمة اليمنية صنعاء.
Our BBC correspondent in Yemen reported that fresh protests broke out in the Yemeni capital Sana'a and 11 other cities. Protesters reaffirmed their demand that all symbols of the regime leave and denounced what they referred to as the U.S. and the Gulf's position of accomplice with the regime in dealing with the people's revolution. On the other hand, local medical sources confirmed to the BBC that 5 citizens were killed and 15 others were wounded in the preliminary outcome of an airstrike that targeted a squad of cars at the entrance of Abyan province. Local residents say civilians were driving the cars, but security sources said the strike targeted al-Qaeda members in the cars.
Yemen, with a population of 23 million, is on the verge of a complete humanitarian crisis. Reports speak of the Yemeni president, Ali Abdullah Saleh's imminent return from a Saudi hospital after having to leave the country for treatment. He was injured in an ambiguous and violent attack earlier this month. However, political observers do not expect that the wounded president's reappearance will resolve the crisis, regardless of whether he transfers power immediately or retains it. They say that he couldn't have solved the crisis even when he was healthy, and the situation is bound to be aggravated further by his remaining in bed for a longer period of time without reaching an urgent political solution. Dozens of soldiers from President Saleh's army announced that they will join the people in the squares demanding the toppling of the regime. But it does not seem as though the opposition figures will resolve the conflicts in their favor anytime soon. In terms of security, the violence has moved from Zinjibar and Aden in the south to Arhab north of Sana'a. In addition, attacks with various weapons were carried out on Freedom Square in Taiz in central Yemen. As usual, all sides accuse each other of being behind the acts of violence. Activists in Sana'a took to the streets demanding the formation of a transitional council, rejecting the Gulf solution and condemning what they said to be human rights violations committed against protesters by the president's loyalist security forces.
This is a message to the world that all those detained and kidnapped have a right to enjoy the freedom that people of the whole world seek.
These protests come as UN Human Rights Council envoys are visiting Sana'a to inspect the situation and submit a report to the Security Council, paving the way for what appears to be the internationalization of the Yemeni issue.
The delegation is assessing the situation in Yemen to prepare a report and make specific recommendations to the Human Rights Council and various international organizations in order to build a foundation for an important international resolution.
The deteriorating living conditions across the country are just as bad as the pictures show. After recent events took place, tens of thousands of Yemenis lost their jobs and their source of livelihood. Adding to their suffering is the price hike of basic food supplies and the scarcity of fuel and water. At night, the country is left to endure long hours of darkness because the electricity has been cut off. However, some Yemenis say that the night will end and a new dawn will break. Anwar Al-Ansi, BBC.
أمر ملك البحرين الشيخ حمد بن عيسى الخليفة بتشكيل لجنة مستقلة.
Bahraini King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa ordered the formation of an independent fact-finding commission tasked with investigating the protests and events witnessed in the kingdom in February and March. During an extraordinary cabinet meeting, Bahrain's king confirmed the invitation to launch a national dialogue and stated that the kingdom will not tolerate any human rights violations by any side.
من أي كان.
We have decided to appoint an independent fact-finding commission to look into the events of February and March. It will be comprised of eminent persons with extensive expertise in international human rights law, who have no role in our government nor in our political sphere. They have been chosen because of their personal stature and international achievements.
The news agency said Saudi occupation forces were redeployed across Bahrain while Sheikh Sadek al-Jumari demanded the Saudi occupation immediately leave the country. He indicated the opposition parties have called for a self-determination demonstration on Thursday.
Over 3 months after Saudi Arabia invaded Bahrain to crack down on peaceful protests there, news agencies reported on the redeployment of Saudi occupation forces. Statements made by an unidentified Saudi official contradicted the news. He considered it to be standard to restructure the position of these forces, but stated it did not imply that danger was over. He confirmed that these forces will not completely retreat. A Saudi government source had earlier announced that the majority of these forces were getting ready to withdraw from Bahrain on Monday. Another source said the pullout would be gradual. In either case, observers believe that both scenarios will not reduce the anger of the Bahraini people or international condemnation.
When the Saudi army entered Bahrain, it did so while raising the banner of victory. As for now, it is leaving while raising the banner of surrender and the shame that will pursue it. This shame has led it to the trash bin of history. The Bahraini people will always remember this oppressive army.
A February 14th revolution coalition leader, Sheikh Sadek al-Jumari, demanded Saudi occupation troops immediately leave the country after having surrounded Bahrain by land, air, and sea. He announced that all opposition parties are calling on all sides to participate in the self-determination demonstration on Thursday, denying Bahraini officials accusations of Iranian interference in Manama's affairs. He stated that the Bahraini king's invitation to hold a dialogue was destined to fail and said it is opposed by all opposition parties, individually and collectively. They view the dialogue as an attempt to thwart and seize the revolutions and reduce international pressure on Manama. The series of persecutions carried out by Manama's authorities in all shapes and forms against its unarmed people is still ongoing. The latest episode was the Ministry of Education's announcement of having fired 11 teachers from the Imam Al-Ghazali Intermediate Boys School. They were fired on the basis of recommendations by investigation committees. The salaries of others were reduced without any investigation. According to a statement released by the Ministry of Education, the number of teachers who were fired has reached 24. Meanwhile, the military court continues the prosecution of doctors and nurses. Some have been released on bail, while others have had their trials postponed. Despite the authorities' crackdown, protesters managed to commemorate the anniversary of the martyrdom of Imam Musa al-Kazim, peace be upon him, in massive funeral convoys that were challenged by Saudi occupation forces, especially in the capital of Manama.
Elsewhere in the news now, Pakistan's military has launched a barrage of missile attacks inside Afghanistan, killing at least 22 people and injuring scores of others. Reports say over 50 rockets hit a border area in the eastern Kunar province. Afghan officials say a number of women and children are among the dead. At least 78 people have been injured. The attacks have reportedly destroyed or damaged several homes. The incident comes as Pakistan, Afghanistan and the US are holding tripartite talks in Kabul. The recent attacks against Kunar and Nangarhar provinces are expected to be the focus of the talks. A Press TV's correspondent in Kabul, Faiz Khurshid, told us more about the recent cross-border violence between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Eastern provinces of Afghanistan, especially Kunar and Nangarhar, continue to be hit by a barrage of rockets fired from Pakistan. And we know that many homes have been totally destroyed by these rockets. Locals there are fleeing to other provinces to save their lives. The rocket attacks have greatly angered the Afghan officials. President Hamid Karzai has strongly condemned this, and he called on the Pakistani authorities to stop these rocket attacks. But we are also hearing from the Pakistani army spokesperson these no rounds have been intentionally fired into Afghanistan. So there is now a kind of blame game going on. The Afghan authorities are saying that the Pakistani authorities are not doing enough to stop the militants to cross the border into Afghanistan. And the Pakistani authorities are saying that the militants are stationed in Kunar province and they are making cross-border attacks into Pakistan.
Press TV's Faiz Khurshid in Kabul. Now, the death toll from a Taliban attack on the luxury hotel in Afghanistan has reached 21. 10 civilians, 9 attackers and 2 policemen were reportedly killed after militants stormed the Intercontinental Hotel in the capital, Kabul. 2 foreign nationals are also among the dead. The Taliban say they wanted to target Afghan and Western officials holding security talks at the hotel. Pakistan's defense minister has ordered the US to leave a remote desert airbase in the country. Chaudhry Ahmed Mukhtar says secret airbase Shamshi is reportedly being used for unmanned drone attacks and will soon be passed on to the Pakistani army. He said that Pakistan has made many sacrifices in the war against terrorism, while payments from the Coalition Support Fund have stalled. Mukhtar's order to vacate the base comes shortly after he announced Pakistan is reviewing relations with the US in the so-called war on terror. Now, at least 8 civilians have been reportedly killed by a NATO airstrike in Libya. Several other civilians were also injured in the air attack, which targeted a market in the town of Tuarega. Since it began its air campaign in Libya, NATO has repeatedly targeted civilians and even the revolutionary forces fighting the troops loyal to longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. Moving on to the war front, battles are raging on in Libya between the forces loyal to Muammar Gaddafi and the revolutionary fighters. The latest reports say the revolutionaries have seized a major complex of weapons bunkers belonging to the Gaddafi forces in western Libya.
Leader of the Islamic Movement's northern branch in Israel, Sheikh Raed Salah, was arrested last night in London. The hardline Muslim cleric was due to appear at a pro-Palestinian event in the British Parliament at the invitation of Labour Party MPs. According to British press reports, Salah landed in Heathrow Airport and managed to pass immigration checks, despite a decision made last week by the Home Secretary to ban him from the country. Salah avoided police and gave a lecture to a crowd of 500 Muslims in London on Monday night on the effect of the Arab Spring on Palestinians. He's expected to be deported in the coming hours. The radical sheikh has served jail time in Israel for assaulting police and maintaining contacts with foreign agents. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated his call to Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Speaking last night to the Jewish Agency Board of Governors in Jerusalem, Netanyahu also restated his commitment to a Palestinian state.
I understand that we will have to have a historic compromise, which is very painful. So I stood before my people of Israel, and I said numerous times that I will accept a Palestinian state. Now President Abbas must stand before his people, and he has to say these 6 words: I will accept the Jewish state. He has to say it. And I will repeat this over and over and over again, because it is the attempt to fudge. It's the attempt to fudge and evade and obscure this essential component of peace.
Netanyahu is also reaching out through the new media. Using the Prime Minister's YouTube site, he will be fielding questions from around the world. A few months back, Netanyahu's first live YouTube question and answer session attracted over 1 million views. This time, he's hoping to field questions from viewers in the Arab world.
It's very good to have this chance to have this internet conversation. It's the second time we're doing it. First time we had hundreds of thousands, I think over 1 million people who entered and viewed this discussion. So I encourage all of you to send your questions, including and most especially viewers from the internet in the Arab countries. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'd like you to hear what I have to say in response.
UN recognition of Palestinian statehood without Israeli agreement would largely be a symbolic victory that will not change realities on the ground. That's the view of Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad, who told the Associated Press today that he does not want the Palestinian people fooled into believing that this will change their lives.
Unless Israel is part of that consensus, it won't. Because to me, this is about ending the Israeli occupation. We could get the recognition of 191 countries. If the 192nd is Israel, it won't. Why? Because what we were talking about is ending the occupation. Speaking literally, not figuratively, coming back from New York to the reality of having to be ushered in by Israeli soldiers, the bridge, and checkpoints and the rest of it, I mean, who is to really actually persuade anybody that there's been a substantive change?
The High Committee to Support South Kordofan launched Kadugli's call to raise monetary and material aid for those affected by the war in Qatar Tahrir Square in the White Nile state, under the auspices of the state's civil administration. It is expected to continue the appeal for 1 week.
Under these captivating tunes and under the auspices of the White Nile State Civil Administration, the High Committee to Support South Kordofan launched Kadugli's call to raise monetary and material aid for those affected by the war in the state of South Kordofan.
This is the first group that came here. For 1 week, all residents of the White Nile from varied ethnic backgrounds and political affiliations, including the People's Movement, will come together to contribute to this appeal by supporting the people in Southern Kordofan.
In addition to gathering financial and material support for those affected by the war, the High Committee to Support South Kordofan has called on residents of the White Nile to view the situation on the ground and the current level of stability witnessed in the state.
I could say that the situation has returned to normal. Many of the brothers and sisters who fled the state have returned home. We, the High Commission in the White Nile, have told this great group of people that we are ready to work on helping those who wish to go back to Nuba.
Confirming the bond that links all Sudanese, the residents of Nuba expressed their gratitude and appreciation for the experience they shared with other citizens of the country who were watching over their security and stability. They confirmed it as a message for all those concerned within the People's Movement.
Today, we can say that we discovered, in reality, a conspiracy from the People's Movement, which is now proposing the situation of Darfur and the situation of the relations with the South from the Nuba Mountains platform and within the Nuba Mountains negotiations. We say that this has really confirmed to us that this agenda is not that of the residents of Nuba.
Kadugli's appeal in the White Nile will continue for 1 week, granting the state's residents the opportunity to renew the era of former cooperation with the residents of Southern Kordofan by offering all they can to those in need. Mustafa Ali Abdullah, Sudan TV, the White Nile State, Tahrir Square, Kosti.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.